Commander Lee Hanna pressed her face against the cold glass of the observation deck. The stars looked the same as they always had, bright and welcoming. But she knew that everything had changed forever. The message from the Galactic Council still echoed in her mind like a bad dream. All human representatives must report to Nexus Prime immediately. Emergency session, priority alpha. She had been so excited when the message first arrived 3 days ago. Emergency sessions usually meant new discoveries or important trade agreements. Humans had been members of the Galactic Council for over 300 years. They had helped build space stations, shared their knowledge of medicine, and fought alongside alien friends in 2 major wars. Now she understood the truth. The emergency was about them. The meeting hall on Nexus Prime was massive, big enough to hold representatives from all 47 member species. Hanna had walked into that hall feeling proud to wear her blue human uniform. She had expected to sit with her usual friends from the Centauri delegation and maybe share jokes with the Vegan ambassador. Instead, she found herself facing a wall of cold stares. Every other species in the galaxy had gathered together, and they were all looking at the humans with fear and anger. The great circular chamber felt like a courtroom, with humanity sitting alone in the center while everyone else judged them. Chancellor Vorthak of the Altarian Republic stood at the main podium. His tall, blue-skinned form cast a long shadow across the floor. Hanna had known him for 15 years. They had worked together on the Mars terraforming project. She thought he was her friend. The Council has reached a unanimous decision, Vorthak announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Humanity has become a threat to galactic stability. Your rapid expansion across space, your aggressive curiosity about everything you encounter, and your refusal to accept the natural limits of civilization make you dangerous to all peaceful species. Hanna felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Dangerous? Humans had never started a war. They had always shared their discoveries. When the Therian plague had threatened to kill millions, it was human doctors who found the cure. When pirates attacked trade routes near Proxima, it was human ships that drove them away. We do not make this decision lightly, continued Vorthak, but the evidence is clear. In 3 centuries, humanity has established colonies on over 200 worlds. You have built space stations and systems that other species considered too dangerous to explore. Your scientists ask questions that should not be asked. Your explorers go to places where no one should go. Representative Kim Hyejan stood up from the human delegation. Chancellor, we have always followed council law. Every colony we built was approved. Every exploration mission was reported. We have shared all our discoveries with other species. How can you call us dangerous? A low rumble of angry voices rose from the alien delegates. Hanna could hear words like aggressive and uncontrolled and too fast, whispered in a dozen different languages. Vorthak raised one of his 4 arms for silence. That is exactly the problem. You do not understand limits. When the Council suggested that 200 colonies were enough, you asked for permission to build 50 more. When we said the outer rim was too dangerous for exploration, you sent ships anyway. When we advised caution with quantum research, you built bigger laboratories. Because we wanted to help, Hyejan replied, her voice breaking. Every discovery we made, we shared. The new medicines, the faster ships, the better farming methods, we gave everything to the Council. And that is why you must go, said Ambassador Zelnari of the Vegan Confederacy. You advance too quickly. You change too much. Other species need time to adapt, to consider, to plan carefully. Humans want to run when everyone else wants to walk. The final vote was announced an hour later. 46 species voted to expel humanity from the Council. 0 voted against. 0 abstained. It was the first unanimous decision in Council history. The sentence was immediate exile. All human colonies, stations, and ships had 72 hours to leave Council space. Anyone who remained would be considered a hostile invader. All joint projects with human involvement were cancelled. All trade agreements were void. All friendship treaties were torn up. 300 years of cooperation ended in a single afternoon. Captain Park Jun-ho received the evacuation order while his cargo ship was docked at Kepler Station. He had been loading medical supplies bound for the colony on New Busan. The station master, a friendly Altarian named Keltar who had shared drinks with him many times, would not even look at him. "You have 6 hours to clear the dock," Keltar said, staring at his computer screen. "Any human vessel remaining after that will be impounded." "Keltar, it's me, Junho. We've known each other for 10 years. What's happening?" "I'm sorry," Keltar whispered. "Orders are orders." Across human space, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Families who had lived on council planets for generations were told to pack only what they could carry. Children born on alien worlds were suddenly declared unwelcome. Marriages between humans and other species were dissolved by government order. Dr. Kim Minji watched 30 years of research burn in the laboratory furnaces on Arcturus Prime. Her life's work on alien plant diseases went up in smoke while security guards made sure she took nothing with her. Her research partner, a brilliant Centauri scientist named Vental, stood at the window with tears in his large black eyes. "I don't understand," he said. "Your work saved our crops on 12 worlds. Why are they destroying it?" "Because we work together," Minji replied sadly. "And apparently that was a mistake." Engineer Oh Tae-yang barely had time to download basic schematics before the computers locked him out. The fusion drive improvements he had developed with alien colleagues were classified as council property. The quantum communication array that connected the galaxy was suddenly forbidden technology for humans to use. In one day, humanity lost access to scientific advances they had helped create. The human fleet gathered at the edge of their territory, a massive collection of colony ships, cargo vessels, exploration craft, and military escorts. Nearly 2 billion people found themselves homeless, floating in space with nowhere to go. The ship stretched across space like a metal river, engines glowing as they waited for orders. Admiral Choi Suho stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony, looking out at the largest refugee fleet in galactic history. His comm officer reported that ships were still arriving from distant outposts. Families who had been separated by the sudden evacuation were trying to find each other across hundreds of vessels. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving requests for instructions from over 3,000 ship captains. They want to know where we're going." Suho looked out at the stars that had once welcomed humanity with open arms. Now those same stars marked the borders of a galaxy that no longer wanted them. "Tell them we're going to survive," he said. "Whatever it takes, wherever we have to go, humanity will survive." The great ships turned away from council space and headed into the unknown darkness between stars. Behind them, the galaxy they had called home grew smaller and more distant. Ahead lay only empty space and uncertainty, but they would not give up. They were human, and humans never gave up. Captain Namjiwoo was drinking his morning coffee when the sensors started screaming. The coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor of his small patrol ship, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the readings that made no sense at all. Massive energy signatures, the kind that could only come from planet-killer weapons. "Computer, verify sensor data," he said, his voice shaking. "Confirmed. Multiple high-energy discharges detected in Sector 77 Alpha. Source appears to be the New Sol system." New Sol? Jiwoo's heart stopped. His sister lived there with her family. 2 million humans called that planet home. It had been one of the first colonies humans built after joining the council. A beautiful world covered in rice fields and cherry blossom forests. He pushed his engines to maximum speed and jumped into hyperspace. The journey that usually took 6 hours felt like 6 years. When he finally arrived at the edge of the New Sol system, what he saw made him throw up. The planet was gone. Not destroyed, not broken into pieces, but completely gone. Where New Sol should have been, there was only empty space and glowing debris. The 3 moons that had orbited the planet were cracked and burning. The space station that had housed 50,000 people was twisted metal floating in the void. Jiwoo's hands shook as he activated his emergency beacon. "This is Captain Nam Jiwoo to all human vessels. New Sol system. New Sol is..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The response came from Admiral Choi Suho himself, broadcasting from the flagship Harmony. Captain Nam, we're receiving similar reports from 12 other systems, all former human colonies, all destroyed within the past 24 hours. 12 systems, 12 worlds where humans had lived, worked, raised families, and built dreams, all gone in one day. Sir, what about survivors? Jiwoo asked, though he already knew the answer. None found so far, Captain. I'm sorry. The reports kept coming in, over the next few days. Captain Lee Minho had discovered the remains of Jeju Prime, once home to the galaxy's most beautiful underwater cities. The oceans had been boiled away, leaving only a dead rock floating in space. The crystal domes that had protected 3 million humans were melted slag. Commander Park Subin found what was left of Busan Station, the massive space habitat that had orbited a gas giant for 2 centuries. The rotating rings that had provided artificial gravity were shattered. The gardens where children had played among earth flowers were frozen and dead. Refugee coordinator Lee So-young tried to make sense of the reports flooding in from across human space. Her small office aboard, the transport ship Freedom, was covered in charts and data screens, each one telling the same horrible story. Confirmed destruction of New Incheon colony, population 2.4 million, she read from her latest report. No survivors detected. Planetary atmosphere completely stripped away. Her assistant, Jung Min-seo, a young man who had lost his parents on New Seoul, marked another red X on the wall chart. That makes 37 colonies confirmed destroyed, ma'am. 17 more are still not responding to our calls. So-young closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Each number represented millions of lives, families she had helped relocate during the Great Evacuation, children who had been born on alien worlds and knew no other home, elderly people who had spent their whole lives building something beautiful in the stars. The pattern is clear, she said quietly. They're not just removing us from council space, they're trying to erase every trace that we ever existed. The worst discovery came from Commander Yoon Sang-min, who had been leading desperate rescue missions to save any humans who might still be hiding in the outer systems. His ship, the Courage, had jumped into the Andong system hoping to find survivors from the mining colony there. What he found instead was an alien fleet still at work. They're not just destroying our colonies, he reported over the secure channel. They're sterilizing entire systems. I'm watching Therian ships strip mining the asteroid belts where our mining stations used to be. Altarian vessels are using plasma torches to burn away the orbital platforms we built. They're removing every bolt, every piece of metal, every sign that humans were ever here. Intelligence Officer Kang Yoonbi had managed to intercept and decode some of the alien communications during these destruction missions. What she learned made her blood run cold. They call it the cleansing protocol, she reported to the emergency council meeting. It's not random destruction. This was planned months in advance. Every human colony, every space station, every research outpost was targeted. They have detailed maps of everything we built over 3 centuries. Admiral Kim Woo-jin, the highest-ranking human military officer still alive, studied the decoded messages on his tablet. The aliens were being very thorough. Not only were they destroying human settlements, but they were also erasing all records of human contributions to council projects. According to these intercepts, they're rewriting history, he said grimly. The medical advances we shared, the farming techniques we developed, the star charts we mapped, they're claiming other species discovered all of it. In their new history books, humans will never have existed. But the most chilling part was why they were doing it. The intercepted messages revealed the truth that the council had hidden during the exile vote. They weren't just afraid of human expansion or curiosity. They were terrified of human potential. Dr. Shin Yura, a psychologist who had been studying alien behavior for decades, explained it during a broadcast to the refugee fleet. The other species advanced very slowly over millions of years. They're comfortable with gradual change, with careful planning, with staying within safe limits. But humans have gone from primitive cave dwellers to space travelers in just a few thousand years. We advanced too fast for them to understand or control, so they decided to kill us all, said Captain Lim Jae-ho, whose colony ship carried 50,000 refugees from the destroyed worlds. Not just kill us, Yura replied. They want to erase the very idea that rapid progress is possible. If they succeed in wiping out humanity and all records of what we achieved, the other species will never know that they could advance faster. The Council wants to keep the galaxy locked in slow, controlled development forever. The reality of their situation was becoming clear to everyone in the human fleet. This wasn't just exile or even war. This was genocide on a scale that had never been seen before. The aliens weren't satisfied with driving humans away from their space. They wanted to remove humanity from the universe entirely. Commander Yang, Hewen discovered the final piece of the puzzle when her scout ship intercepted a Council military broadcast. The alien fleets weren't stopping with former human colonies. They were hunting down the refugee ships themselves. Long-range sensors detect multiple alien battle fleets moving toward the outer rim, she reported. They're following our ion trails. Estimated time until contact, 6 days. Admiral Choi Suho stood before the holographic display showing the approaching enemy fleets. Thousands of alien warships, representing every species in the Council, were closing in on the helpless refugee flotilla. Ships designed for exploration and colonization would be no match for military vessels built for war. They're not going to let us escape, he said quietly. They want to finish what they started. But even facing complete annihilation, the humans refused to give up. Captain Oh Seung-hyun, commanding a damaged mining ship full of families, sent a message to the entire fleet that would be remembered forever. They can destroy our worlds, burn our cities, and hunt us through space, he broadcast. But they cannot destroy what makes us human. Our curiosity, our hope, our refusal to accept that things cannot be better. These things cannot be killed by weapons. Whatever happens, we will not go quietly into darkness. 2 billion human beings floating in space with nowhere to run began to prepare for the end. But they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, unbroken, and still reaching for the stars. Chief Engineer Park Hyasu crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel of the transport ship New Hope, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air recycling system was failing again, and she had to fix it with spare parts that were already spare parts from other spare parts. 5 years had passed since the Great Exile began. 5 years of running, hiding, and barely surviving in the cold emptiness between star systems. The human fleet had scattered across the galaxy's edge, small groups of ships drifting in the void like seeds blown by a cosmic wind. Hand me that plasma torch, she called to her assistant Kim Dong-yun, who was squeezed into the tunnel behind her. The boy was only 19, born on New Seoul just months before the evacuation. He had learned engineering not in a classroom but in the dark corridors of dying ships. Are you sure this will work? Dong-yun asked, passing her the tool. We've already replaced the main processor 3 times. Hyasu smiled grimly. It doesn't have to work perfectly. It just has to work long enough. That had become the motto of human engineers everywhere. Nothing had to be perfect anymore. It just had to keep people alive for one more day. The fleet had learned to survive in ways no textbook had ever taught. Captain Song Kyung-ho had become an expert at finding resources in dead systems, teaching his crews to strip metal from asteroid belts and extract water from the ice of forgotten comets. His ship, the Scavenger, led convoys of mining vessels through the dark spaces between stars, gathering the raw materials that kept the fleet alive. There, he told his crew as they approached another lifeless system. See that debris field near the 4th planet? Looks like an old space battle, maybe thousands of years ago. Those wrecked ships will have metals we can use. His daughter, Song Ji-young, had grown up learning to tell the difference between useful scrap and worthless junk just by looking at it. At 15, she could pilot a salvage drone through a maze of spinning debris that would challenge adult pilots from the old days. Dad, there's something strange about this wreckage, she said, studying her scanner readings. The metal composition is weird. It's not from any species I know about. File it in the database, Kyung-ho replied. Maybe someday we'll figure out who they were. The human database had become one of their most precious resources. Teacher Lee Jung-hwa made sure that every ship in the fleet contributed to it. Children learned not just mathematics and science, but also the stories of Earth, the history of human colonies, and the dreams their ancestors had carried to the stars. Today we're going to talk about the Cherry Blossom Festival on New Sol, she told her class of 12 students crammed into the cargo hold of the education ship Learning. Even though the planet is gone, the memory of those beautiful trees lives on in our stories. 8-year-old Park Minji raised her hand. Teacher, will we ever see real cherry blossoms? Maybe not the ones from New Sol, Zhonghua replied gently, but humans planted cherry trees on dozens of worlds. Somewhere in this big galaxy those trees are still blooming, and someday we might find them again. The children born in exile were different from their parents. They had never known the safety of a real planet or the warmth of a sun that wasn't filtered through ship hull metal, but they were also tougher, more adaptable, more willing to find hope in small things. Dr. Bei Jimin had made the breakthrough that saved them all during the 3rd year of exile. Working in a laboratory the size of a closet, he had developed a new type of reactor that could run on almost anything: space dust, solar wind particles, even the background radiation of the universe itself. The old reactors needed rare elements that we can't find out here, he explained to the engineering council. But this design feeds on the most common things in space. As long as we're in the universe, we'll have power. The new reactors changed everything. Ships that had been dying from power loss suddenly had energy to spare. The fleet could run life support systems, computers, and even small manufacturing plants. Children could go to school in classrooms with actual lights instead of flickering emergency strips. But the greatest challenge was not mechanical. It was keeping hope alive in the face of endless darkness. Counselor Young Da-hyun had seen too many people give up. In his small office aboard the hospital ship Healing, he talked to families who had lost everything, adults who couldn't see a future for their children, and elderly people who wondered if they would die before humanity found a new home. I understand why you're tired, he told Mrs. Cho Young-hee, whose husband had died in a reactor accident the month before. We've all lost so much, but look at what we've built out here in the dark. We've created schools where there should be no schools. We've grown food where nothing should grow. We've kept our culture alive when the whole galaxy wanted to erase it. But for what? She asked, tears in her eyes. My children will never have a real home. They'll never run in fields or swim in oceans or feel rain on their faces. Maybe not, Hyung replied. But they'll have something else. They'll know that their people never gave up no matter how dark things got. And that's worth more than all the worlds in the galaxy. Explorer Shin Yuna led the scout missions that searched for a new home. Her small, fast ship could jump between star systems quickly, mapping the empty regions where humans might be able to hide and rebuild. System after system proved to be either too dangerous, already claimed by council races, or simply dead. Survey. Report from Sector 94 Gamma, she transmitted back to the fleet. 3 systems checked. First one has a gas giant with toxic moons. Second system has radiation levels that would kill us in days. Third system, she paused, checking her readings again. Third system is empty, but the planets are all frozen solid. No atmosphere, no resources we could use. It was the same story, everywhere. The galaxy was vast, but most of it was empty or hostile. The few places that could support life were already taken by species that would report human presence to the Council immediately. But as the 6th year of exile began, Yuna's long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Fleet. Command, this is Scout 7, she transmitted, excitement clear in her voice. I'm detecting artificial structures in the Crimson Nebula. Big ones. They don't match anything in our database. Admiral Kim Woo-jin was in a strategy meeting when the message arrived. The fleet's leadership had been discussing their dwindling options, trying to figure out how to keep 2 billion people alive with resources that wouldn't last another decade. Artificial structures? He repeated. Council origin? Negative, sir. These readings are completely unknown. The energy signatures are unlike anything we've seen. And they're old. Really old. Whatever built them has been dead for a very long time. The Admiral looked around the table at his tired officers. They had been running for 6 years, always, one step ahead of council patrols, always searching for something that seemed impossible to find. A place where humanity could survive. Could be a trap, warned Security Chief Lim Dongwook. The council might have set up fake ruins to lure us in. Or it could be exactly what we need, replied Dr. Moon Sun-hee, the fleet's chief archaeologist. If there are ancient ruins out there, they might contain technology or information we can use. At the very least, they might tell us we're not alone. In the galaxy, the decision was unanimous. The scattered human fleet began to converge on the Crimson Nebula, following coordinates that represented either their salvation or their doom. Captain No Hyunsu commanded one of the first ships to reach the nebula's edge. As the swirling red clouds parted before his vessel, he saw structures that took his breath away. Space stations the size of moons hung in the crimson mist, their dark hulls scarred by weapons that must have been fired millions of years ago. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, clearly built by minds that understood engineering in ways humans had never imagined. "My God," whispered his navigator, Lieutenant Seo Jae-hyun. What happened here? Looking at the massive battlefield frozen in space and time, Hyunsu had a feeling that they were about to learn the answer to that question, and that the answer might change everything about their understanding of the galaxy. "Take us in slowly," he ordered. "Let's see what secrets the dead have left for us to find." Dr. Moon Sun-hee floated through the corridors of the ancient space station, her magnetic boots clicking softly against metal floors that had been silent for millions of years. The beam of her flashlight revealed walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and flow like living things even though they were carved in solid stone. "The architecture is incredible," she whispered into her communicator. "Whoever built this place understood engineering principles that we're only beginning to discover. These support beams shouldn't be able to hold this much weight, but they've been standing for eons." Behind her, the exploration team from the research ship Discovery moved carefully through the vast chamber. The space station was larger than most human cities had been, its corridors stretching for kilometers in every direction, but it was completely empty of life, filled only with the echoes of a civilization that had vanished long ago. "Dr. Moon," called out her assistant, Lee Min-jae, from across the chamber. "I found something you need to see." She floated over to where the young archaeologist was examining a wall covered in what looked like a giant mural. But as she got closer, Sun-hee realized it wasn't painted or carved. The images were somehow embedded in the metal itself, glowing faintly with their own light. The mural showed the story of a great war. Ships larger than planets battled across the stars while entire worlds burned below them. In the center of the image was a species that looked remarkably familiar. Tall, slender beings with large eyes and long fingers, working together to build amazing things. "They look almost human," Min-jae said quietly. "Not exactly the same, but close enough to be our cousins." "More than that," Sun-hee replied, studying the images more carefully. "Look at what they're building. Those are research stations, laboratories, universities. This species was dedicated to learning just like us." The next chamber contained something even more amazing, a vast library filled with crystal storage devices. Each crystal was the size of a person and glowed with soft, pulsing light. When Dr. Ryu Min-hyuk, the fleet's best linguist, touched one of them, holographic symbols appeared in the air around it. "It's some kind of data storage system," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "These crystals contain more information than our entire fleet database, but the language—" He paused, studying the flowing symbols. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen, but somehow familiar, like trying to remember a word that's on the tip of your tongue." Working day and night, Ryu began to decode the ancient language with help from the fleet's computers. What he discovered sent shockwaves through the human leadership. "They called themselves the Architects," he reported to Admiral Kim Woo-jin during an emergency briefing. "They were a peaceful species dedicated to preserving knowledge and helping other civilizations advance. But they made one fatal mistake. They refused to limit their research when the Galactic Council ordered them to stop. The parallels to humanity's own situation were impossible to ignore. Like humans, the architects had been curious, innovative, and unwilling to accept artificial limits on their progress. Like humans, they had shared their discoveries freely with other species. And like humans, they had been punished for their generosity. According to these records, Rue continued, the Council has done this before, many times. Whenever a species advances too quickly or asks too many questions, they're eliminated. The architects were just one of dozens of civilizations that have been destroyed over millions of years. Chief Scientist Han Jaemin had been studying the architect technology with growing amazement. Their machines were unlike anything humans had ever encountered. They seemed to be alive, growing and adapting. Like biological organisms rather than mechanical devices. It's not quite technology as we understand it, he explained to his research team. It's more like they learned to grow their tools the way we grow plants. These crystals, these walls, even the structure of the station itself, it's all organic engineering. The most incredible discovery came when they found the station's central core. In a chamber the size of a football stadium, a massive crystalline structure pulsed with gentle light. When the human team approached, the crystal suddenly blazed, brighter, and a voice spoke directly into their minds. Welcome, children of the stars, the voice said, warm and kind like a grandmother welcoming family home. I am the keeper of memory. I have been waiting so very long for someone to find us. Captain Lim Soyeon, who was leading the exploration mission, took a step forward. You're still alive after all this time? In a sense, the keeper replied. I am the combined consciousness of all the architects who lived and died here. Before our civilization fell, we preserved our knowledge, our memories, and our purpose in this crystalline matrix. We hoped that someday another species would find us and continue our mission. What mission? Soyeon asked. The chamber around them suddenly filled with holographic images. Thousands of different species, each one beautiful and unique. Some looked like walking trees, others like living crystals, still others like creatures of pure energy. All of them were extinct. To remember, the keeper said sadly. To preserve the knowledge and dreams of every civilization the Council has destroyed. To ensure that their voices are never completely lost. We have been the guardians of galactic memory for 10 million years. Dr. Kim Yerim, the fleet's chief medical officer, stared at the images in horror. How many species have they killed? 637 confirmed extinctions, the keeper replied. Each one eliminated for the same reason. They advanced too quickly, asked too many questions, or refused to accept the Council's limits. The current Council races have built their civilization on a foundation of bones. The keeper showed them how the system worked. The Council allowed species to develop to a certain point, then either forced them into stagnation or destroyed them entirely. This ensured that no one would ever challenge the Council's authority or discover their crimes. But you survived their attack, observed Commander Yang Hee-won. How? We did not survive. The keeper corrected her gently. Our bodies died millions of years ago. Only our memories and knowledge remain. But we have been waiting, hoping that someday a species like yours would find us. A species with the curiosity to explore forbidden places and the courage to face terrible truths. The keeper offered humanity a choice that would change everything. In exchange for continuing the mission of preservation, ensuring that the extinct civilizations would be remembered, humans could access the combined knowledge of 637 different species. It will change you, the keeper warned. This knowledge cannot be contained in organic brains alone. To truly understand what we offer, you must allow your technology to merge with ours. Your ships, your tools, your very bodies will become something new. Admiral Kim Woo-jin called an emergency council meeting to debate the decision. The human leadership gathered in the conference room aboard the flagship Harmony, looking out through the windows at the ancient stations that surrounded them. It's a risk, admitted Dr. Shin Yura, the fleet's chief psychologist. We don't know what we'll become if we accept their offer. We might not be human anymore. Are we really human now? Asked Captain Park Jun-ho. We've been changed by exile, by loss, by years of struggling to survive. Maybe it's time to become something more. Engineer Choi Min-hee had been studying the architect biotechnology and was amazed by its potential. Their ships can heal themselves, adapt to any environment, and run on almost any form of energy. With this technology, our fleet could survive indefinitely. We could explore parts of the galaxy that no one has ever seen. But we would also be taking on a huge responsibility, pointed out Dr. Moon Sun-hee. Becoming guardians of all these dead civilizations, is that a burden we want to place on our children? Teacher Lee Jung-hwa spoke up from the back of the room. I've been teaching our children about human history and culture. But what if there's a bigger story to tell? What if we could teach them about 600 different civilizations, all the different ways intelligent life can exist in the universe? Li Dao. Debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity had already lost their original home and identity. Perhaps it was time to become something new, not just human, but guardians of the galaxy's lost voices. Captain No Hyunsu was among the first volunteers to undergo the transformation. He stood in the architect medical bay, watching as biomechanical devices attached themselves to his nervous system. The process was strange but painless, like having new thoughts slowly wake up in his mind. "How do you feel?" asked Dr. Kim Yerim, monitoring his vital signs. "Different," he replied, then smiled. "But also more myself than I've ever been. I can sense the ship around me, feel its needs, understand its thoughts. It's like gaining a new sense I never knew I was missing." One by one, the human fleet began to change. Ships that had been held together with spare parts and hope suddenly began to heal themselves. Hulls grew stronger and more flexible. Engines became more efficient. Life support systems adapted to provide exactly what each person needed. But the most important change was in the humans themselves. As they connected with architect biotechnology, they gained access to memories and knowledge from hundreds of extinct civilizations. They learned new sciences, new art forms, new ways of. Agent Lee Yun-ho adjusted his disguise one final time before stepping off the transport shuttle onto New Alteria Station. To anyone watching, he looked like a typical vegan merchant, tall, pale, with the distinctive silver eyes that marked his supposed species. The biosuit that covered his human features was one of the architect technologies that had proven most useful for infiltration work. The station was crowded with beings from dozens of different species, all going about their business under the watchful eyes of Council security forces. None of them suspected that a human was walking among them, carrying information that could change everything. "Remember," whispered the voice in his earpiece, transmitted through quantum channels that the Council couldn't detect. "You're looking for dissidents and free thinkers, people who ask uncomfortable questions. The underground is bigger than the Council wants to admit." Yun-ho made his way through the commercial district, using his enhanced senses to listen for the subtle codes and signals that marked resistance members. The architect biotechnology allowed him to hear conversations from across the station and detect the stress patterns that indicated when someone was lying or afraid. At a small cafe in the lower levels, he found what he was looking for. A group of young Altarians were speaking in hushed voices about the inconsistencies in their history books. One of them, a female named Kayla Inth, was questioning why certain star charts had been marked as forbidden. "The official explanation doesn't make sense," she was saying to her companions. "These systems are supposed to be empty, but the energy readings suggest they once had massive civilizations. Where did everyone go?" Yun-ho approached their table carefully. "Excuse me," he said in perfect vegan dialect, "but I couldn't help overhearing your discussion. I'm a trader who visits many systems, and I've noticed similar inconsistencies in the historical records." Kela Inth looked up at him with suspicious eyes. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The kind that suggests certain species have been erased from galactic history," Yun-ho replied quietly. "Species that might have made discoveries the Council preferred to keep secret." The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours and changed 4 lives forever. By the time Yun-ho left the station, he had recruited his first cell of Altarian, resistance members and given them access to carefully selected pieces of architect knowledge. Medical treatments for diseases their government claimed were incurable, agricultural techniques that could end famine on their colony worlds, and energy technologies that could free them from dependence on council-controlled power sources. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as human agents made contact with beings who had always suspected something was wrong with the official version of history. Dr. Seo Jae-hoon had spent years studying the patterns of council oppression, and his research revealed a disturbing truth. Every species in the council has been deliberately held back, he reported to the Human Leadership Council. Their technology should be thousands of years more advanced than it is, but whenever a breakthrough occurs, it's classified as dangerous and suppressed. The council maintains power by keeping everyone else weak. The proof was everywhere once you knew what to look for. The Therian people had developed faster than light communication centuries ago, but the council had banned its use except for official messages. The Centauri had discovered clean fusion power, but their reactors were limited to producing just enough energy to maintain current living standards. The Vegans had created biological computers that could solve complex problems in seconds, but they were forbidden from building more than a few prototype units. It's not just about preventing war, observed Dr. Kim Yerim during one of their encrypted briefings. It's about preventing progress itself. The council races figured out long ago that the best way to stay on top is to make sure no one else can climb. But the most shocking discovery came from investigative journalist Park Joo-hee, who had been working undercover on the council homeworld of Nexus Prime. Using her skills as an information gatherer and the architect technology that allowed her to interface directly with computer systems, she uncovered files that had been sealed for millions of years. The current council isn't the original council, she reported in an encrypted broadcast to the human fleet. The real founders of galactic civilization were overthrown eons ago by the species we know as the council races. They've been pretending to be the original government ever since. The files revealed that the galaxy had once been ruled by a true democratic federation, where all species had equal voices and knowledge was shared freely. But a group of militaristic races had staged a coup, eliminated the original leadership, and installed themselves as permanent rulers. They had spent millions of years rewriting history to hide their crimes. Every species that gets too close to rediscovering the truth gets eliminated, Park explained. That's why the architects were destroyed. That's why we were exiled. And that's why hundreds of other civilizations have vanished without a trace. Armed with this knowledge, humanity began a careful campaign to wake up the galaxy. They couldn't reveal themselves directly. That would bring the full force of council military might down on their heads. Instead, they worked in the shadows, sharing information and technology with resistance groups on dozens of worlds. Engineer Ko Sung-hwan had developed methods for secretly upgrading alien technology using architect biotechnology. A few microscopic organisms introduced into a planet's power grid could gradually improve efficiency by 300%. Tiny medical nanobots added to water supplies could eliminate genetic diseases that had plagued populations for generations. Food crops could be enhanced to produce twice as much nutrition without anyone realizing the changes weren't natural mutations. The key is to make the improvements look like natural discoveries, he explained to his team. When a young Therian scientist suddenly figures out how to cure the red plague that's been killing their people for centuries, it has to look like genuine inspiration, not outside interference. The results were remarkable. Across council space, quality of life began to improve in ways that the ruling species couldn't explain. Famines ended mysteriously as crop yields increased. Industrial accidents became rare as safety systems somehow became more reliable. Children stopped dying from diseases that had been considered incurable. More importantly, people began to ask questions. If these problems could be solved so easily, why hadn't the council solved them years ago? If the technology existed to make life better for everyone, why was it being restricted? Dr. Hwang Ji-hyun, working with Architect Biological Systems, had made discoveries about the nature of consciousness that changed everything she thought she knew about intelligence. The biotechnology didn't just enhance human abilities, it allowed different types of minds to communicate directly. We've been assuming that all intelligent species think the same way we do, she reported to the Science Council. But the architect knowledge shows us that there are dozens of different types of consciousness. Some species think in colors, others in music, others in mathematical equations. The Council has been suppressing this diversity because they're afraid of what might happen if different types of minds work together. This led to the most ambitious human operation yet. Using their enhanced abilities to communicate with non-human minds, human agents began making contact with the truly alien species that lived in the galaxy's unexplored regions. Beings made of crystalline energy, hive-mind organisms that spanned entire star systems and ancient machines that had been waiting millions of years for someone to talk to them. The galaxy is far stranger and more wonderful than the Council wants anyone to know, reported Commander Yoon Sang-min after returning from a deep space exploration mission. There are forms of life out there that could teach us things we never imagined, but the Council has declared all of them dangerous and forbidden contact. As word of these discoveries spread through underground networks, more and more species began to openly question Council authority. The Rigelian Collective announced they were withdrawing from several Council trade agreements. The Vegan Confederacy began refusing to enforce certain Council laws. Even some Altarian colonies started declaring independence from their central government. The Council's response was predictably harsh. They declared martial law on several worlds and began arresting anyone suspected of spreading dangerous ideas. But their crackdowns only made more people realize how oppressive their rule had become. Intelligence Officer Kang Yunbi intercepted Council communications that revealed growing panic among their leadership. "They're losing control," she reported, with satisfaction. For the first time in millions of years, the Council races are genuinely afraid. They can feel their grip on power slipping, but they don't know what's causing it. The breaking point came when a young Centauri scientist named Velnari discovered something that had been hidden from his species for centuries. While researching ancient ruins on his homeworld, he found evidence that the Centauri had once been capable of incredible technological achievements. Their ancestors had built cities that floated in the clouds and spaceships that could travel between dimensions. "We weren't always like this," he announced in a broadcast that reached. Council archivist Zenthari felt his hands shake as he stared at the sealed data crystal in his private study. For 20 years, he had been the keeper of the Council's historical records on Nexus Prime. He thought he knew everything about galactic history. But the crystal he had found buried deep in the forbidden archives told a very different story. The records were clear and undeniable. The humans had not been dangerous aggressors who threatened galactic peace. They had been healers, teachers and explorers who had solved problems that the Council had claimed were unsolvable. The medical advances that had saved billions of lives, the agricultural techniques that had ended famines on dozens of worlds, the clean energy systems that had reduced pollution across the galaxy, all of it had been human innovations, shared freely with anyone who needed them, and the Council had destroyed them for it. "This can't be right," he whispered to himself, reading through report after report. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Council had lied about everything: the reasons for exile, the destruction of human colonies, even the basic facts about what humans had contributed to galactic civilization. Zenthari made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. Using encrypted channels that he hoped the Council security forces couldn't trace, he sent the data crystal to a network of young reformers who had been quietly questioning Council policies. His message was simple: the truth must be told. Crystal reached the underground resistance on New Altaria within 3 days. Kelainth, the same Altarian who had been recruited by human agent Lee Yun-ho years earlier, nearly dropped it when she realized what she was holding. "These are official Council archives," she told her cell of resistance fighters. "If this information is accurate, everything we've been taught about galactic history is a lie." But the data crystal contained more than just historical records. Somehow it also carried a message from the humans themselves, coordinates for a meeting that would determine the future of the galaxy. Admiral Song Min-sung received the Altarian response while his transformed fleet lay hidden in the Crimson Nebula. The biomechanical ships had grown and adapted over the years, becoming more beautiful and more powerful with each passing season. Some were now large enough to carry entire cities, their hulls covered in gardens where human children played among flowers that glowed with their own light. "They want to meet," reported Captain No Hyun-soo, his consciousness now so deeply merged with his ship that it was hard to tell where the man ended and the vessel began. Representatives from 17 different species, all asking the same questions about their history. "It's time," Min-sung decided. "We've spent 15 years preparing the galaxy for this moment. If we're going to reveal ourselves, now is when it has to happen." The meeting was arranged for a neutral location, an ancient trading post in the Vale sector that had been abandoned for centuries. One by one, ships from across the galaxy began to arrive, their crews nervous but determined to learn the truth about their history. Commander Yang Hee-won led the human delegation, her ship materializing out of what looked like empty space as its adaptive camouflage deactivated. The assembled alien representatives gasped as they saw the vessel's organic hull rippling with biomechanical systems that seemed almost alive. "Greetings," she broadcast to the gathered ships. "I am Commander Yang Hee-won of the Human Preservation Fleet. We are the species your governments told you were extinct." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Some ships tried to flee, their crews panicking at the sight of the supposedly eliminated humans. Others demanded explanations, their communication channels buzzing with questions and accusations. But Kayla Inth's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait," she broadcast from her small Altarian scout ship. "Let them speak. We came here for answers, and they're the only ones who can give them to us." What followed was the most important conversation in galactic history. For 6 hours, the human representatives shared the true story of their exile, the destruction of their worlds, and their discovery of the architect ruins. They showed holographic records of the 600 civilizations that had been eliminated over millions of years, each one destroyed for the same crime, refusing to accept artificial limits on their progress. Dr. Kim Yarim, now serving as humanity's chief diplomat, addressed the assembled delegates with calm dignity. "We understand your shock and fear. Your governments told you we were dangerous, and in a way they were right. We are dangerous, to systems built on lies and oppression. But we have never been a threat to innocent people who simply want to live, learn, and grow." The proof was undeniable. The humans displayed medical technologies that could cure diseases the Council claimed were incurable, energy systems that could power entire worlds without pollution, and agricultural methods that could end hunger forever. All of it was being offered freely to any species that wanted it. "Why?" asked Zenkara, a representative of the Rigelian collective. "If the Council destroyed your worlds and hunted your people, why are you offering to help us?" "Because that's what we do," replied Commander Yang Hee-won simply. "We explore, we learn, we share what we discover. It's not about profit or power. It's about making the universe a better place for everyone." The meeting lasted 3 days, and by the end, 17 different species had agreed to form a secret alliance against Council rule. But they all knew that their greatest challenge lay ahead, convincing their own people to rise up against governments that had controlled them for millions of years. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Park Junho, now serving as humanity's intelligence coordinator, intercepted a Council military communication that changed everything. "They're planning something called Final Solution Protocol," he reported to Admiral Song Min-sung. "According to these intercepts, they're going to blame the current unrest on human infiltrators and use it as an excuse to implement galaxy-wide martial law. Every species will be placed under direct Council military control." The Council's plan was simple and brutal. They would claim that human terrorists were responsible for the growing rebellion, then use emergency powers to suspend all local governments and rule the galaxy directly through military force. Any resistance would be crushed without mercy. "They're going to turn the entire galaxy into a prison camp," observed Dr. Seo Jae-hoon grimly, "and once they have absolute power, no one will ever be able to challenge them again." But the Council made one fatal mistake. They assumed that humanity was still the same broken refugee fleet that had fled into exile 15 years earlier. They had no idea what the humans had become during their time with the architect technology. The moment the Council announced Final Solution Protocol, everything changed. On world after world, the carefully planted improvements that human agents had been making for years suddenly activated all at once. Communication networks that had been running on primitive technology suddenly gained the power to reach across the entire galaxy. Medical facilities found themselves equipped with architect healing systems that could perform miracles. Transportation systems upgraded themselves to carry people and supplies at unprecedented speeds. Most importantly, the biomechanical enhancements that had been secretly introduced to countless populations began to awaken dormant abilities. People who had never questioned authority suddenly found themselves able to think more clearly than ever before. Workers who had accepted their lot in life realized they could be so much more. Scientists who had been restricted to approved research topics discovered they could push the boundaries of knowledge in ways they had never imagined. The effect was like a galaxy-wide awakening. Billions of beings suddenly understood that they had been living in a cage of artificial limitations, and they wanted out. The Council's response was swift and merciless. Battle fleets launched from every major military base, heading for worlds where the rebellion was strongest. They intended to make examples of entire populations, showing the galaxy what happened to those who defied Council authority. But when the first Council fleet arrived at the Altarian colony of New Freedom, they found something impossible waiting for them. Human ships. Not the broken refugee vessels the Council remembered, but transformed biomechanical craft that seemed to grow and adapt even as they watched. Ships that could repair battle damage in seconds, that moved like living creatures through space, that responded to their crew's thoughts and emotions. Admiral Korath of the Altarian Defense Force had expected to face a small group of rebels, with improvised weapons. Instead, he found himself confronting Captain Lee Minho's task force, 12 human vessels that had once been mining ships and cargo haulers, now evolved into something beyond the Council's understanding. "This is Admiral Korath of the Council Defense Fleet," he broadcast. "You are in violation of galactic law. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction." "This is Captain Lee Minho of the Human Preservation Fleet," came the reply. "We are not in violation of any law. We are enforcing the original Galactic Charter, the one your government destroyed millions of years ago. You have one chance to stand down peacefully." The battle that followed lasted exactly 7 minutes. The 4 Council ships built for intimidation rather than real combat found themselves outmaneuvered by vessels that could predict